Hey guys, today we are listening to one of the great short story from the book of 100 World's Greatest Short Stories. The title name was A Man with Two Lives. The story was written by Ambrose Bierce and narrated by Niharika. Here is the queer story of David Willem Duck, related by himself. Duck is an old man living in Aurora, Illinois, where he is universally respected. He is commonly known, however, as Dead Duck. In the autumn of 1866, I was a private soldier of the 18th Infantry. My company was one of those stationed at Fort Phil, County, commanded by Colonel Carleton. The country is more or less familiar with the history of the garrison, particularly with slaughter by the Sioux of a detachment of 81 men and officers, not one escaping through disobedience of orders by its commander, the brave but reckless Captain Fetterman. When that occurred, I was trying to make my way with important dispatches to Fort C.F. Smith on the Big Horn. As the country swarmed with hostile Indians, I traveled by night and concealed myself as best I could before daybreak, the better to do so. I went afoot armed with a Henry rifle and carrying 3 days' rations in my half snack. For second place, I concealment I chose what seemed in the darkness a narrow canyon leading through a range of rocky hill. I continued many large bollard ditch detached from the slopes of the hill behind one of these. In a clump of sage brush, I made my bed for the day and soon fell asleep. It seemed as if I had hardly closed my eyes. Thought I, in fact, it was near midday when I was wakened by the report of a rifle, the bullet striking the boulder just above my body. A band of Indians had trailed me and had me nearly surrounded. The shot had been fired with an execrable aim by a fellow who had caught sight of me from the hillside above. The smoke of his rifle betrayed him, and I was no sooner off my feet then he was off his and rolling down the declivity. Then I ran in a stopping posture, dodging among the clumps of sage brush in a storm of bullets from invisible enemies. The rascals did not rise and pursue, which I thought rather queer, for they must have known by my trail that they had to deal with only one man. The reason for their inaction was soon made clear. I had not gone 100 yards before I reached the limit of my run. The head of the gulch, which I had mistaken for a cone, it terminated in a concave breast of rock nearly vertical and destitute of vegetation. In that cul-de-sac, I was caged like a bear in a pen. Pursuit was needless. They had only to wait. They waited for 2 days and nights, crouching behind a rock topped with a growth of mosquito, and with the cliff at my back, suffering agonies of thirsty and absolutely hopeless of deliverance. I fought the fellows at long range, firing occasionally at the smoke of their rifles, as they did at that of mine. Of course, I did not dare to close my eyes at night. I lacked to sleep. I was a keen terror. I remember the morning of the third day, which I knew was to be my last. I remember rather instantly that in my desperation and declines, I sprang out into the open and began firing my repeating rifle without seeing anybody to fire at. And I remember one more of that fight. The next day that I recollect was my pulling myself out of a river just at nightfall. I had not a range of clothing and knew nothing of my whereabouts. But all that night I travelled cold and food store towards the north. At daybreak, I found myself at Fort C.F. Smith, my destination. But without my dispatches, the first man that I met was Sergeant named William de Berois, whom I knew very well. You can fancy his astonishment at seeing me in that condition and my own at his asking who the devil I was. Dave Duck, I answered. Who should I be? He started like an owl. You do look it, he said, and I observed that he drew a little away from me. What's up? He added. I told him what had happened to me the day before. He heard me through, still staring. Then he said, My dear fellow, if you are Dave Duck, I thought to inform you that I buried you 2 months ago. I was not with a small scouting party and I found your body full of bullet holes and newly scalped, somewhat mutilated otherwise too. I am sorry to say, right well, you said you made your fight. Come to my tent and I will show you your clothing and some letters that I took from your person. The commandant has your dispatches. He performed that promise. I showed me the clothing which I resolutely put on, the letters which I put into my pocket. He made no objection. Then took me to the commandant who heard my story and cordially ordered Brissock to take me to the crowd house. On the way I said, Bill, because did you really and truly bury the dead body that you found in this stock? Sure, he answered, just as I told you, it was Dave Duck. All right. Most of us knew him, and no, you damned imposters. You did better tell me who you are. I did give something to know, I said. A week later, I escaped from the guard house and got out of the country as fast as I could. Twice I have been back, seeking for that fateful spot in the hills, but unable to find it.